Ladies and gentlemen, this is White Lightning 777, and I haven't broadcasted a video in a while. Just wanted to share some thoughts on the whole thing with Trump, and they keep claiming he's a white supremacist. Okay, how does a white supremacist have a blonde-haired, blue-eyed daughter, lets the daughter convert to Judaism, and not either disown or destroy said daughter? I mean, if you show me a white supremacist that does that, I mean, they put his ass in the fucking in the Smithsonian, because guess what? That's a pretty rare bird right there. And then you have these fake news claiming that somehow that these guys are the biggest threat we have. Okay. Now, what's the biggest threat you have? And this is my perspective as a security guard and armored truck and whatnot. The biggest threat you have is not what's in a history book. It's like what's right here. Who is threatening to kill you right now? Who has a gun pointed at you right now? Who's doing this with a gun right now? Who's going to smack you with a crowbar right now, or throw a firebomb at you right now? That is the greatest threat you face. Violence is personal, politics is local, and terrorism occurs in the present. Something that occurs in the past is history. Okay. The federal government, law enforcement aren't spending billions of dollars to stop the Oklahoma City bombing. Why? Because it happened. It's history. Okay. And, in terms of those, let's do a thought experiment. Let's look at the news. Of these people claiming, the worst of these guys is like Don Lemon, CNN. I just refer to him as Lemmy Winks. If you watch Lemmy Winks, how many, let's do a thought experiment, over the past 6 months, how many black-owned businesses were blown up or burned down by white supremacists on Don Lemmy Winks, CNN? 0. How many black-owned businesses were boarded up and they spray painted black-owned businesses on the barriers on the boards? How many of these same businesses were burned down or blown up by Antifa and BLM? Hundreds. Even, why, if somebody's afraid of white supremacists, why do they spray paint black-owned business when they board up a building? Don't you think that would make them happy? And they do that because they feel that BLM and Antifa are black supremacists, and they may leave them alone. Okay, somebody says, do you reject white supremacism? I don't know. Do you reject black supremacism? You're a neo-Nazi? No. Are you a Negro Nazi? No. If you're a nationalist, okay, racial nationalist, and you also believe in Marxism, that's National Socialism. That's a Nazi. A Nazi is a National Socialist. So these, black supremacist types are literally Negro Nazis. Literally. It's not just a joke. It is a literal fact. Okay? KKK plus commie equals Nazi. Okay? It's not hard to understand. And even the supremacism, that's not even just racism. Racism, you think there's a genetic difference between individuals and they should just leave each other alone or whatever. Supremacism is an extreme belief that only one race has rights and that they need to exterminate and wipe out everyone else and take over the whole world. Okay? That's not just racism, that's supremacism at a whole other level. Most of you so-called racist types just want to, create ethnic enclaves for themselves and just essentially tune in, turn on, and drop out of the multicultural world. Not the most practical thing, and it's a great way to get poor. Wonderful way to get poor. But how that is, in terms of how many white supremacists in the past 6 months used lasers on police officers, causing them to be permanently blinded, in violation, by the way, of the Geneva Conventions, because that's a forbidden weapon like nerve gas. Well, 3 succeeded, and Antifa has done this dozens of times to police officers and vehicles and even aircraft. They succeeded in blinding 2 or 3 officers out west. How many white supremacists have made improvised explosives out of fireworks? Explosives that have components and shrapnel that is non-metallic, that does not show up on an X-ray. See, if you make a bomb on a battlefield and the shrapnel doesn't show up, is not designed to show up in an X-ray, that's also a war crime. That's a violation of the Geneva Conventions. How many white supremacists did those things? 0. How often Antifa has done this? Antifa has thrown tens of thousands of bombs, all of which, all or most of which, have shrapnel that does not show up on an X-ray. How many white supremacists in the past 6 months have thrown a Molotov cocktail at somebody? 0. Okay, now how many white supremacist groups, and it's not even obvious that it is, threatened? There was one incident where they threatened Governor Gretchen Wilson. Now, this was a militia group, okay? And it's worth noting that the militia members were white and that Gretchen Wilson is white. And that kind of gets to the truth about crime. Most crime is within your race. It's intra-racial violence, not interracial violence. That's why you have a lot of black and black violence. You have a lot of white on white violence. These groups, and even if you look at the mafia, most of the victims in the mafia were other Italians. Even if your supremacist group succeeds in preventing all interracial violence against your people, your crime rate is going to be almost the same. In fact, a side effect of supremacism is that it jacks up the rate of intra-racial violence. Why? Because those who worship themselves can't really police themselves. And if making the race look good is more important than keeping individual members safe, well, your crime rate skyrockets. Black supremacism is the root cause of the crime and the poverty in these neighborhoods. If you can't get along with, if you want to destroy the government and you can't get along with officials, you can't obey an officer that doesn't look like you, and you think you're not going to put your money in the bank because it's owned by the man and the Jews and blah blah blah, and you have all these conspiracies. You won't work for somebody that's not of your own people. Well, you're going to be poor. You're going to be unsafe, and your risk of bad interactions with the cops is going to be bad. And that's true whether you're some skinhead Aryan Brotherhood kind of person encountering a black officer, or whether you're some of these Negro Nazi, hoodlum criminals, black supremacists encountering a white officer. You have the same dynamic. And by the way, twice as many whites are shot by the cops as blacks. Let's see, roughly, in terms of poor people, twice as many people below the poverty line are white as opposed to blacks. Gee, I wonder why. Race is a crazy man's way of talking about the true issue, which is social class. If you are homeless, you're going to have more issues with the cops than if you live in a mansion. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what sex you are. And Donald Trump has done more to do outreach to black people, to minorities, than any other Republican. He's so crazy. He's literally gone up to everybody and asked for everybody's vote, whether he thinks they like him or not. He put $500 billion into black neighborhoods. Look at all the black people he's pardoned. Look at the crime bills. Look, he has Diamond and Silk as friends. Kanye West, what's his name? Officer Clark. How many white supremacists can only hang around friends like that? If he's a white supremacist, he is the biggest failure ever. And billionaires aren't really big failures at much. Now, how many white supremacists would agree to give Israel more money, more guns, and move their capital to Jerusalem. Now, in all seriousness, Trump is probably a Zionist. He's an American patriot. He has Zionist tendencies, but he's not racist. I mean, he had all these Jewish grandkids. How the hell could you be a white supremacist with that? I don't know. The Nazis and Jews, they only disagree on about 6 million. They only have 6 million disagreements, including whether said 6 million incidents actually occurred, starting with that. So no, Trump isn't a racist. He's a capitalist. Probably a Zionist, and, claiming that just, that's the way it is. So, vote Trump in 2020, vote for Ivanka in 2024. We don't need a communist with dementia in the White House. I mean, we have enough problems with communists in Beijing, Democrats in Beijing. We certainly don't need more communist Democrats in our government. I mean, the Soviet Union fell. Stalin was wrong. Get over it. And I'm signing out.